Welcome to our top 10 classroom management styles for all subjects project for our college class at an undisclosed college. My name is Ricky. I'm here today with my partner, Molly. And
Hi there.
yeah, say hello. Do you have anything to share before we start?
Hello. Nope, I am Molly. That is all.
Excellent. That's all we needed. We've won them over already.
Perfect.
So our assignment was to create a top 10 classroom management tips and tricks and advice list um, of some advice for teachers to better manage their classrooms.
Yeah, so
So
this is
we're gonna go through.
obviously our top 10. So everyone else may have a different
Good
one, but
point.
these are what we thought were the most important classroom management skills for an effective classroom.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So we
Our
can pick
first
up
one,
with.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
our
Read it.
first one is having consistency from day one. So our learning communities start on that first day of the school year. So making sure when you set down those guidelines and start creating relationships that you have a defined set of rules for all your students to show that everyone's held to the same standard. We want to make sure that we're following through with these expectations starting from day one to create that consistent environment. So we've linked some stuff on our website here for some tips to creating a safe learning environment and also an activity to do a student's Bill of Rights. So thinking of your classroom rules as the Constitution and each period of your students submitting their own Bill of Rights that they work on together during those first few days of school.
I mean, it's a great idea, and that's, as someone who is a social studies connoisseur, I love the idea of creating a Bill of Rights, setting the ground rules that you can always build upon if you need to, but setting the stage with stuff that is, worthwhile and kind of defines what's meaningful for a class. But the reason I think this is a really good rule to add to as a method for managing a class. I think it's really beneficial because it defines what matters. And it's not just for the teacher, but it also helps the students. And if there is that set group of rules and, you know, if you let the students be part of making that, it makes the space a lot more meaningful and gives them a little bit of agency and responsibility. And
Mhm.
clearly, this is more geared towards higher grade level classes. But we,
You know what? I
I
think
think we're both in
I think
agreement on
that
it.
can go to elementary schools and stuff as well, though, because honestly, something like this Bill of Rights shows your students' priorities. I mean, having the right to feel safe, be yourself, be treated fairly, all these ideas that are listed here. I think all of those can apply in any age level. I mean, if it will be a little bit harder trying to get those ideas across to elementary school kids, but I really think it's important to have those priorities from the students. And like you said, it really does hold them accountable for their own actions.
I 100% agree. I just think this rule really serves that like coming of age situation for students that are really looking for that sense of autonomy. And of
That's
course, it
true.
works for the younger grade levels, but it means having them be part of what is occurring in the classroom. I think just makes for a more enjoyable experience as a teacher and as a student. So
That's true.
I think we can move on to the next one.
Hmm.
Um, so rule number 2 is take note of positive and negative behaviors from students. Um, in this one, and we get into a little in the next bullet point, but what's important here is that we want teachers to recognize students for their positive and negative experiences and not kind of make that assumption that because a student does something wrong or because a student may act up on a regular basis, that those are the things that define students. Um, and I think it's most important, we bring up as a method for our classroom ideas section, um, the 5-to-1 complement rule, which Molly enlightened me on, but it is definitely a beneficial idea where you have, for every one criticism, or, and by criticism it's constructive, you never want to insult the student or make them feel like they've truly done something that is like a fundamental flaw. It's more constructive criticism, but you want to structure it around a series. It doesn't have to be 5, but as many compliments as you can. So when you're working with a student or a group of students, you want to be sure that you're facilitating a positive space, that they can grow in. And if they're constantly being put in a position where they are uncomfortable or feel like they aren't doing enough, then it kind of creates a self-fulfilling prophecy for them where they don't necessarily feel proactive about trying to improve their situation because there's nothing they can do. But if you lump on a whole bunch of compliments, even if it's not necessarily applicable to what they're doing, I think we're both in agreement that this is a beneficial way of handling students and keeping them engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think stacking positivity is such a huge part of creating those meaningful relationships with your students, making sure that they have those wins every day, making sure that every student has a win. However it may be, whether it's academically, socially, even just saying, hey, your hair looks awesome today. Whatever you did, keep it up. Stuff like that can really make a difference in a student's day, and making sure that you're really stacking the cards for them to ensure every student's success.
And I think we'll get into it on the next topic, but I just want to point out that as an idea for a classroom activity or a way to make this easier as a teacher, because obviously the load of dealing with a group of students, sometimes you're lucky and you have a lower student teacher ratio, and then sometimes you have a lot of students, but either way there's definitely going to be more of them than there are teachers. You have to find a way to kind of measure their experiences and try to understand their situation. So we included as a classroom idea what we had found a gratitude journal, which was essentially something that teachers and students can do, but basically it's a record. And you have people keep a note of their behaviors and kind of reflect on their behaviors that they've performed, whether it be positive or negative, and evaluate how things, whether it's consequences or teachers complimenting certain things or students or the peers recognizing things, you can realize there's a lot that you can do with these sorts of journals, and it's kind of just record keeping. And you don't have to grade it or anything, but having students fill it out, and even if it's a once a week thing or a once a month thing or every other week thing, you just give them an opportunity to vent, but also kind of express their own feelings about the criticisms and compliments they're getting. You can take a look at those and evaluate how to better interact with those students individually, which will inevitably lead to better interactions with them on a larger scale.
Mm-hmm. And I think this ties in really nicely with treating students as individuals and separate from their actions. Really remembering that while you may have a classroom full of students, each one is still their own individual person. And making sure that you're focusing on those connections, not the consequences. Another topic to kind of discuss in with this is appropriate classroom punishment. A big thing that has been talked about quite a bit more recently is making sure that you're not penalizing the entire class for the punishment of a few. We're really talking about students as individuals, and you need to make sure you're keeping with that even when you're doling out consequences. And obviously, you want to try and intervene before you get to the point where you need consequences. Early intervention is always better than having a consequence. But when it gets down to the point where you need that consequence, there are other disciplinary ideas other than full classroom punishment that have proven a lot more effective, um, both with individual students and with class-wide motivation. When you're punishing a whole class, the students who are doing what they're supposed to are going to get demotivated because it's out of their control. They could not have fixed whether or not they got this punishment because it wasn't them. So making sure you're using ideas that have been proven successful, such as pulling aside a student for a one-on-one, early intervention when you've got disruptive behaviors, and providing a support system for your students that promotes a calm classroom to kind of nip those disruptions in the bud. One of the ways that you can do this is to really make sure that you're focusing on those connections and really learning who your students are outside the classroom. So considering having a getting to know you activity at the beginning of the year, maybe again at the middle of the year to see if things have changed. We've got some templates listed on our site. Check out, we've got templates for that, and we've also got some resources on diversity. This could be a good diversity lesson as well, tying into this, and making sure that they're respecting each other's differences. But really, it's that student first mentality that you want to keep on the forefront of your mind.
Absolutely. Molly, you put it so well. It's almost like you had it written down.
Weird. It's almost like it was written on a website that was beautifully designed.
I can't. I think you put it really well. There's a lot of important. I think this one might be. I didn't. This is a really good one, and it's something that I think we're both very passionate about. But
Yes.
it's so important to never recognize people as a group and do your best to just treat people as themselves and as they want to be treated, but also recognizing that there are things about people that are internal and have you'll never have any idea of knowing unless you either ask, they share it with you on their own accord, or you kind of may see sometimes over time that they might drop a few hints here or there about things that they have going on or they feel or experience. And it's your responsibility as someone who is facilitating a classroom space to be an advocate for those students and someone that recognizes that those differences matter and you need to treat people like those differences mean something to you and it matters and they should be proud of those things that they have or represent or choose to believe. And when it all comes together, it's what's most important to, and I think it's most important to student-centric learning, recognizing students as individuals and catering to that individuality to the best of your ability.
Exactly.
Well, I won't segue quite as well as you did, but that was number 3 for all of you listening. Number 4 is be a problem solver, not a problem haver. Now, both Molly and I came from the same institution prior to being at our current institution, where we were both members of the um, housing and residential life program. We were people who lived inside of buildings and worked with the college students that were there. As I was an RA, I believe you lived in the. You were in
I was
the
also an RA,
women's
but
center?
I was in the LGBT center, but I was an RA as well.
Yeah, which
They were just in the same building.
bless you. Bless you. Um, so we this was something that in my time there was beaten into us as something that really mattered. And they always said it, and it was be a problem solver, not a problem haver. And it really resonated with me. So I was like, Molly, we have to include this, and she of course, agreed, because how could she disagree with such an awesome idea? And essentially, this is the premise that you, as a teacher, things are going to happen, and when things happen, you can't let it get to you. You gotta adjust, and that, I mean, adaptability will come later. But what's most important here is problem solving, and essentially the idea is that a problem solver is someone who, when presented a problem, will work to find a solution, and a problem haver is someone who, when presented with a problem, will find more problems and kind of just make everything combust. And I think we're both in agreement here that being a problem solver is definitely more conducive to a successful working environment and classroom environment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so when it all comes together, in this case, we understand, even though we are not yet teachers, that this like rough things happen, and you might have some stuff that you need to solve, and kind of being a not a representation, but a role model for the students as a problem solver, and when something happens, being able to take the time and figure out the best way to handle it rather than just freaking out is definitely beneficial, and the students will see that and become more proactive at trying to problem solve themselves, which is why for the classroom idea portion, we linked a video to a middle school program where it's not just one teacher, but a group of teachers came together to create an eighth grade wide format, um, where problem solving was the core focus of the entire um, lesson. But it was a whole bunch of different classes. They were working in their social studies, science, English, math. They had a shop technical tech science class that they worked in, and it's a really good video. I don't know if you got to watch it, Molly, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a little close to home. It's only in Maine, so it's pretty close. And basically, what the point of it all is that by teaching problem solving at a early age and as a method of learning, students will be able to be more effective members of society when they move on, which means that if it's happening in the classroom, and obviously there will be bumps in the road because they're still learning, but having it as a method of interaction in the classroom, whether it's in academics or socially, the students are going to be developing crucial life skills, and things will probably be more manageable if they're actually in a position where they can solve problems themselves.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's definitely a good skill.
problem solving is a great life skill for students to have too. So, encouraging that in your students in your classroom is a great way to have engaged citizens who are good problem solvers. And part of problem solving is in this next point we have breaking down the plan with clear expectations. In problem solving, you're breaking everything down and solving it. You know what? Starting every day with a clear plan and breaking it down for your students so that everyone's on the same page with what the expectations are.
Can I cut in? Can I
Oh
come
yeah,
in real quick?
absolutely.
I know I just ruined it, but I want you to know that your transitions seamless.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I will do my best to continue making mine as choppy as possible so that yours
Perfect.
look that much more right.
Sounds good. So I mean, this is a big thing that I think is really important because I know when I'm talking, I can get off topic. I can ramble on about something forever, and this is not only helpful for your students, but it's incredibly helpful for you as well. It's something that you can do, and it keeps you accountable and your students accountable to you. So breaking down your lesson into the goals and having your students aware of the goals of your lesson will help them to focus on what they're supposed to be learning that day. And also, if they get to the end of the class period and they haven't learned something, there's that question that they can bring back to you and say, hey, I didn't learn this. Can you help me with it? So this is a great way for you to get feedback as well from your students on what's working. One thing that my daughter's teacher uses all the time and I love, especially with the distance learning, she uses Google Sheets. Just kidding, Google Slides, one of those ones with the S's. And I was able to find some really cool templates. If you guys haven't checked out this site, check out teacherspayteachers.com. They have all different resources. Some are free, some are paid. You can sort by grade level, but this one is a template for Google Slides for an agenda. And most schools use Google Classroom, so you can have this loaded in your classroom before the students come in. They open up their Chromebooks and they go to this first slide that says exactly what they're doing for the day, what their expectations are, if there's work they're supposed to be doing when they come in. You can use this to put your activator up. You can put discussion questions up. It can really be a super helpful resource that also works to keep your classroom calm, because you don't have all these questions asking, what are we doing next? When are we moving on? Wait, I don't get that. You can go back and you can say, listen, this is the agenda for today. This is what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on here. That again, I think it kind of links back to what we were saying before, or at least I said before, about you know, making students feel like they're part of something, and allowing students to express their situation. When you share the plan, they feel like they have some sort of insider information, and when they have that sensation of inclusion and like, ooh, we get to be part of the decision making process, it's like candy to them. They just want more. So like by having your plan, and again we'll get into that later, having your plan set up and sharing it with them, they really do benefit from that excitement, and that I don't want to call it like complicit, but like they're complicit. They are like, they feel like they get to be the ones making their own decisions.
Accountable. That's the nicer way to say it.
It's definitely, they're like sneaky, but no, your accountability is like the real way. But that, I mean, it's the same thing. Accountability in this circumstances, like they just crave it and they want it so bad. And by letting them just have, it's like just a little bit of sugar, a spoonful of sugar, and they're like, oh my Lanta, we are part of something, and we are so cool for it. So
and students want to take charge of their own learning. They want to be involved in that process. They want to have a say in what's going on. So even though they might not really have that much of a say in this, they at least feel like they are.
Number 6, ask for feedback, give effective feedback. That was a clunky transition because it was me, not because we stopped the video. All right. So feedback is crucial in anything we do, but when it comes to teaching and managing a classroom, offering students feedback as well as receiving feedback from students is definitely something that we see as beneficial. And it kind of gets into the same kind of area that we were just talking about previously, about giving students that sense of complicity.
Accountability.
Like it doesn't sound right. Accountability. The students feel like they're part of it. If you're asking them, hey, how am I doing? Or what
collaboration?
We enjoy these activities that we've done. Are they difficult? Are they fun? Are they something that you see as helping you grow? Is there something you think we could be doing that would be more beneficial? Let's take a look at it. And when you do that, students are going to feel like, again, they're part of it and they get to make their own decisions, or at least be helpful in making decisions for themselves.
Hmm.
But also, you get feedback, which makes you a better teacher.
Hmm.
It's a win-win. The other thing about it is that you need to be able to give constructive feedback, and that can be academic, or it can be something that is socially, or maybe it's something that has absolutely nothing to do with school at all. But learning how to give constructive criticism and making it have a meaning behind it that is more than just the surface level criticism of actions or decisions, and allowing there to be some sort of point of growth that comes from having this feedback be delivered, whether it's to you as the teacher or to the students that you are teaching. It makes for a space where people are feeling like they are growing, and I think that's what's most
Well, and it's important to
a
remember
safe
that
place to grow.
yeah, and it's important to remember that every class is different. So what's working for one class may not work for another class. So
Exactly.
getting that feedback from every one of your classes, not just the one class, will really help you be able to tailor your lessons to make sure that you're serving all of your students.
Because like as teachers we expect, or yeah, there's like this expectation that you get your feedback from above, whether it's administration or the head of your department or whatever it is. You get feedback. You're
Mhm.
constantly getting feedback. And students, realistically, unless you're giving them different forms of feedback, are just getting grades. And that's not always the best measurement of a student, but also there's more to them than their academic ability. And it's your job to help them grow academically, but it's also your job to help them grow in every facet of their life. So by giving them feedback that isn't just a report card or a letter grade or number grade on a test, or anything that has academic value, you're setting them up to be better at receiving feedback if you do it well, but also
Mhm.
be better at giving feedback to others, which will make them, again, better people in the end of the day, which is, again, what really matters here.
Yeah,
So,
and making sure you fall into that 5-1 um, breakdown where you're giving 5 positives to the 1 negative. Making sure that
yeah,
you're not just giving that negative feedback. You know, when you're sending letters home, when you're calling parents, not just calling when it's negative, also calling when it's positive, because sometimes those kids just want any feedback, so they'll act out in order to get anything. So rather than feeding into it with negative feedback, try and head it off at the pass by starting with that positive feedback.
and I mean that's a really good point. Making sure that you are finding opportunities to give feedback in every way, not just when there's a problem,
Mhm.
is so crucial. And that's why, here's my segue. We recommend that just as you complete grades for your students, you can use our awesome classroom idea, which we have presented in the actual website here, of allowing students to complete report cards for you. Um, so it's there's a photo that is on the actual website that you can reference, but
And
it's
that's from
simply
Teachers
the
Pay
same
Teachers as
principle.
well, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I ended up
Oh,
grabbing
okay.
a different one
Oh, okay.
because I didn't want to pay because I'm a poor college student. But otherwise, you could just Google it. How free is that? There's tons of options. Report cards for all sorts of things.
Mhm.
The one we feature is pretty basic, but you could ask for any feedback and create your own if you feel like there's certain things you want to hear from the students, and that's talking about being intentional with what you do. Take the time to plan out how you want to receive feedback so that you can improve, means that you're kind of setting that example again for the students of thinking of ways that they can ask for feedback rather than just saying, what am I doing wrong, or how can I do this better. They can think intentionally about what they're already doing and ask questions that is going to improve exactly what they're trying to improve, rather than just general statements about what's wrong. And I think
Mhm.
that helps academically and socially. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
having students fill out report cards for you, I recommended that you do it at the end of a section, not like an everyday thing, but like, you finished a whole, they get to their final summative, whether it's a test or a project or an essay or something. And, after that, you say, well, what did you all think of this whole lesson? And it doesn't even have to be for a grade. Give them bonus points on that assignment for having completed an evaluation, whether it's positive or negative. You take it into consideration, and then whether it's the next section or the next time you do that whole section for the next class, you can adjust and make that change so that it is a more beneficial experience for everyone.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think playing into that feedback, making sure that you're not wasting your students' time. Uh, if you can see you're getting feedback that your students are ready to move on, move on. If you're getting feedback that you know your students are still struggling, make sure you're staying in that subject as long as you can before you have to move on. And that brings us into number 7, valuing your students' time as much as you value your own. So all of us want our time to be valued. We don't want to waste our time. And why waste the time in the classroom? You already have a very specific amount of time that you're trying to cram all of this information into. Why fill it with busy work? So, yeah, I mean, students and teachers already have an overwhelming amount of outside work that they have to do and outside commitments, whether it's after school programs, sports, whatever it may be. You don't want to be grading extra work, and you don't want to be giving your students extra work if it's not useful. So, before you assign extra work to your students, or before you assign work to your students, think about first if it's related to your topic, which may seem like a no-brainer, but you want to make sure your students are on task in the classroom. So you may have a special event coming up or a holiday that you want to do an activity for, but you also have to remember, like, if you're in a math class, you may not want to spend your entire block of an hour doing a holiday activity with collages. Your students may not feel as fulfilled. You won't be progressing um, your curriculum, and while it may be a nice distraction, it may not be the best use of your time. Which brings us to number 2, furthering their learning. So, do your students really need that extra worksheet to practice problems? Is it really going to help them understand the material better if they do 20 problems instead of 4 problems? Will they understand it with those 4 problems, or is it something where repetition is necessary for it to be remembered? It's something that you have to kind of see what the balance is. You want to make sure that you're staying in that zone of proximal development where you're challenging your students enough. You don't want to be stuck in that inner circle of your students doing things they already know how to do unaided by a teacher, where it's not stretching their brain. You want to make sure what you're doing is still giving that little bit of a challenge, but not so hard that you are outside of that ZPD where they would need outside help. And that will keep your students engaged, and it'll keep them doing their work. Students aren't going to want to do work if it's just repetitive stuff. No one wants to do 50 problems of math if it's the same formula for every equation. They may do 5, but they may not need 50. So really seeing what that balance is on whether or not it is actually furthering their learning or if it's just busy work.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think you bring up a good point about like stigma, you know, and when we think about specific classes, you have math, which you brought up repeatedly, and I know that you really really enjoy math. So I
It's
won't
on the
get too
forefront
into
of my mind right now. I've been doing a lot of physics lately.
but math, like when we all think back to math, one of the things that we dreaded most, and it's still something that students talk about, is how much it is like people literally say I'm not good at math, as if it's something that you can't practice enough to learn. And it's the fact that we don't see practice as valuable sometimes when it comes to these certain subjects,
Hmm.
because there's no intention behind it, and it doesn't really become valuable until a certain point. And I think your inclusion of the zone of proximal development is like a really good way to look at it. Like if
Hmm.
students aren't being challenged, then it just becomes stale busy work,
Hmm.
and they aren't going to take the time to try to move forward, because obviously it's easier to just sit around and do nothing. And it's the teacher's job to keep a classroom moving, but also encourage these students to continue looking for opportunities to learn and reading that need and addressing it in ways that is valuable for those students and their time is what's most important here. So like I said earlier, I'm a social studies guy. Like kids think about social studies class, they start daydreaming already. It's like how can we as teachers be more creative with ways to make that time seem valuable, and also give them the important information that is what really matters, the stuff they're supposed to take away from it. And I think that's really just challenging that zone of proximal development, finding the things that you can scaffold them up to so that they can start breaking that barrier on their own. And then once they've broken that barrier, you continue scaffolding.
Hmm.
That's the best way to point it out. And that's a great model for a classroom. So,
Hmm.
I will not do a seamless segue as you have.
Clunk, clunk,
I came
clunk.
up with this little quip myself, though. Don't plan on winging it, but expect to wing it anyway, is literally, I think, and I think you might agree with me, one of the like defining things about teaching that we should all try to master. Adaptability is literally central to being a teacher.
Hmm.
Uh, and we all know, and if you're someone who's reading this list, you probably care enough to try to understand that being a teacher means that there's a lot of planning involved, and you do a lot of work ahead of time so that when you get to the point where you're actually teaching, there's less thinking it through and more of just guiding people through what you've already planned. But there should be that understanding that students are chaotic, and you cannot plan ahead for every little thing that they could come up with to throw a wrench in your plans. And that's exactly what adaptability is all about. Knowing that you shouldn't wing it deliberately, but being ready to make that adjustment if a student presents that, or if a problem presents itself, is what's most important in this specific bit of advice here. Um, so
Wait,
never
Ricky, have you ever
intentionally.
played D&D?
I am a dungeon master. Yes.
So as you're saying this, I'm thinking, we have a campaign tomorrow night, and I'm thinking, when I'm the DM, when I'm the GM, I plan everything out. But no matter what you do, your players are always going to choose something that you have not planned for. No matter how you try and lead them, they are going to do their own thing. And all you can do is hope for the best and lead them on their quest. And I think that the more you're talking about that, the more I'm thinking about
Well, that's why I like the moment that we started this, it like jumped into my head. I've been the dungeon master for like years now.
mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. It's all about adaptability. It's literally you being a dungeon master and being a teacher are just improv. Just
Yep.
being able to fill whatever role you need to fill to get things moving and done. And it's so, I mean, I love it. I feel so satisfied when I can respond so quickly to a situation like it didn't even like throw a wrench in my plan, to the point where like the people I play with are like, how do you do it? Like, how do you just know exactly how to respond to anything? And I'm like, well, maybe it's all the teaching classes I've done, and maybe it's because you guys are predictable. And then they get all upset. But
I know, I love it.
it's such a valuable thing to have.
I love it. You'll have a student who tries to hit you with a hard question, or a player that's trying to hit you with a hard scenario, and you're like, well, actually I planned for that. And then you can be like, well, look at my new presentation on all the ways I planned for that. And then that
Yeah,
student's like,
it's like
man,
you put on your Velma, your Scooby Doo Velma outfit, and you
yeah.
push your glasses off the top of your nose, and you say jinkies, and all of a sudden you have the answer, and everyone's just like, how did they do it? No one knows. But just to include our classroom idea real quick, I included two videos. They're both connected, subsequent from an episode of Glee, one of my favorite shows. And it's kind of an example of just how a teacher can not do a good job in this circumstance. And I won't spoil it because it's a really powerful scene once you get all the way through it. But it's just about thoughtfulness and being able to adjust what you think you know to meet the needs of everyone who needs you to teach them, while also serving the larger whole in a beneficial way without just winging it. This teacher will wing it. You'll see them go out of their way to buy into stereotypes rather than looking deeper into what they need to do to be a better teacher. And their lesson falls flat. And one of the students is going to call them out on it and say, hey, it's not good. And it's actually detrimental that you're doing this. And it's a really great, powerful scene that kind of captures the essence of why winging it is so bad. But being able to wing it is a really good asset to have when you're trying to be a teacher, because you never know what's going to happen. So being able to do it because you know it's going to come up, but not planning on doing it as your immediate way of doing things, is the solution to this problem.
And I think a big thing to talk about too is when you are able to have that adaptability, you can get that respect from your students. You're modeling the type of behavior that your students want to emulate. They want to be able to be prepared and stuff. This is listen, Ricky, I'm trying to have this be a smooth segue. Okay, I'm trying.
I know, that's why I'm laughing.
So our second to last ideal here is modeling ideal behavior. So this is one we hear about in our everyday lives. We're told to follow the golden rule if we're religious. We're told to treat people the way you want to be treated, practice what you preach. This applies not only to us personally, but also in the classroom. When we're asking a student to follow a rule, we should hold ourselves to that same expectation. So if we're telling a student, you can't chew gum, you shouldn't be chewing gum right after lunch when your students come in. On the other hand, if you know that you're that person that needs a piece of gum after lunch, maybe you don't have a no gum rule in your classroom. I had a teacher in high school who You could have gum as long as it wasn't during a lab. During labs, you had to throw your gum out. But when you were just in the classroom, as long as you weren't blowing bubbles, he was fine with it because he also chewed gum and it helped him focus. So our classroom idea for this is having something like a coffee circle when your students come in. It can be a time when students drink their coffee, eat a small snack, and you can have your activator during this time. So you can have small groups, one-on-one time, and you're able to have your small time where you're, quote, breaking the rules, but it's an established time for, this is the time when you can eat and you can have your coffee. After this, everyone packs up, including yourself, even if you're not done with your coffee, and then you move on with the rest of your day. So you're modeling that proper behavior, and you're also able to use it to facilitate some discussions. If you want to see some bad behavior on a teacher, we've got a great clip from Bad Teacher with Cameron Diaz, and it's the first day of school, and she shows some really great behaviors that you should not practice in the classroom.
I love the idea of just as students walk in, you're sitting in one of the desks in the classroom, not at your front desk,
Mm-hmm.
sitting in one of the desks, and you're just like, yeah, everyone come on in. Let's all circle up and we'll just chat for a moment. And I think it runs uniformly through all of the things that we've brought up because it really defines that sense of creating a community within that classroom where people are able to feel like they get to be part of what's going on and that what they are, who they are, what they believe, it all matters. And by sitting down and just having that casual conversation, and I mean, kind of emulating that primal need to sit around the fire and just chit chat, like that's what it's all about, creating that and fostering that community for these students, but also abiding by rules that are constructive in the process of doing so is it's I can't imagine how much fun I will have when I finally get to do that. So um I mean, yeah, we've talked about it through this whole thing about how you should be modeling the behavior you want the students to follow,
Mm-hmm.
and the double standard of teachers that you know do chew gum when they tell students they can't, or you know the teachers that speak over students when students have to raise their hand before they're allowed to speak, or any of these little rules that you should have outlined in your bill of rights at the very beginning that
Mm-hmm.
you develop over time. You when you set the rules and you're consistent all the way through, things happen that are positive. But if you are setting rules for the kids and then breaking them yourself, they see it as this teacher doesn't really care about me. They care about order and rules and making sure that things are in line. And that's not necessarily bad because obviously rules and order are valuable to managing a class. But being able to, again, put people on the forefront of what you're trying to do rather than the rules can
Mm-hmm.
be beneficial for creating that community feel that I think we all crave and want to have in our classrooms.
Absolutely.
Now, are you ready for some cheese?
I'm
Are,
ready for the cheese.
are you ready? Are you done with number 9?
I'm done.
Cool.
I am done with number 9.
Horrible segue. Number 10.
Let's clunk on into number 10.
Horrible segue into number 10. Number 10 is always look for opportunities to continue to grow. If you have not heard, for any listener that finds this website, if you have not heard that teachers are lifelong learners, you need to go back to square one, my friend. Okay? And I'm sitting really, really close to the mic right now to make sure that it comes in clearly because sometimes Zoom cuts out, and I'm going to say it again. Go back to the beginning. Start over if you're not ready to be a lifelong learner, because that is the pinnacle of being a teacher. Someone who is willing to take what they've learned, take what gets thrown at them, take anything and everything that is in their way, around them, above them, within them, outside of them, in other people, whatever is presented to you, and adapt who you are as an opportunity to grow and become a better person, a better teacher, a better friend, a better anything you want to be. But you got to continue to challenge yourself. So I will read the cheese out loud because I don't want anyone to miss this here. So number 10, always look for opportunities to continue to grow. You made it. And quite frankly, you, including Dr. Carolyn, who is clearly an effective teacher, have already performed this step. So congratulations. Teachers are lifelong learners. We learn that from the first day of teacher education programs. So by choosing to read this list, you've already broadened your understanding of teaching as you pursue your way to grow yourself, which I think is a really good way to look at it. You know, finding opportunities, going out of your way. Sometimes it just gets dropped in your lap, but going out of your way to find ways to improve yourself and improve your knowledge and improve your behavior, and ways that you can help others grow based on learning how to grow yourself. It's mind-boggling, and it's so important. And by doing this, you are making yourself and your classroom better. Thus, your classroom is managed. And that is a segue.
Yeah, I mean, this also ties into a lot of things that we talk about here. You know, when you get feedback from your students, that's an opportunity to grow. You know, when you're following all of these ideas that we've put here, you know, if you're practicing these ideas each semester or each year, whatever it is you're teaching, your classroom is going to change a little bit each semester. Maybe not even a little bit, maybe it's a lot each semester. So you're going to be growing each time with all of this new information. So your lesson plans, your billboards, bulletin boards, your handouts from your first year teaching may be very different from your handouts and your bulletin boards your 10th year teaching. And I should hope they are, because you should always be looking for those opportunities to grow and always be learning and changing and fact checking and being the best teacher you can be. And that is my...
Yeah, it's literally evolution. You're like, it's like continuous, metamorphosis into a new version of yourself that is just increasingly capable of dealing with circumstances that are presented to you. And, and I think you're spot on, your first year versus your 10th year. But I think you were getting at it beforehand, that the things that you have, your bulletin boards, that first day of school, all the way to your bulletin boards on the last day of school, your first year, you're going to see growth if you choose to be an effective teacher. And that's just a management tool for your classroom that is undeniably valuable in so many ways. Because as you grow, the space that you are working in will grow with you, as long as you follow the rest of these steps that we showed you, but also find your own steps and look for ways that you think you can make things better, because that's what growth is, coming up with your own ideas based on what you've taken in and learned and adapted into ways that suit you. Because what we've said could obviously be really good advice, but it might not suit you, or your classroom might not need these things.
Mhm.
So when it comes down to it, you get to choose how you want things to be. And obviously, our top 10 list is subjective to our own opinions here.
Mhm.
But it just taking a look at what other people who are in similar positions to you or different positions to you, because I'm sure that Molly and I are both diverse compared to whoever ends up walking in and finding this excellent recording. They just, getting more information. It's like the feedback thing all over again. Getting information about how you're doing from other people will help you adjust so that what you do matters and means more and can be better for the people you're trying to teach. And that's what matters. That's what matters.
Absolutely. So I think this
So
concludes our one-off podcast of classroom
we,
management styles. Be sure to read all of our memes because we think they're funny. So
oh
you
yeah,
should think they're funny too.
we chose to record to reach our auditory learners, but we did have a visual supplement that is a more fleshed out and um, maybe not so rhetorically inclined as this one, but it's a really well put together list that really does, in I think both of our opinion, capture what really helps teachers be better at managing their classrooms.
Hmm.
And it is, if it's anything other than a list, it's an opportunity to take a look at what some other people might say that could be different from what you think. So
Yeah, this is just a jumping off point. Take this and use it and form your own opinions.
especially because we looked extensively at other top 10 lists and they were not that high quality. So
Hmm.
this is, in my opinion, the most high quality list on the internet. So
Exactly.
if you do see it, you should definitely take the time to read it.
I concur.
So yeah, we can wrap it up there. Thank you
Awesome.
for listening. We will not be back unless we have another assignment. But
You will
this,
not see us again, but you will see our site.
yes, our site will never be taken down.
We'll be there in perpetual.
Yes.
In perpetuity. On that
All
note,
right.